For most men, they think that their job begins and ends with I provide income. Whilst that is important in getting out of survival and, moving higher up Maslow's hierarchy of needs is important in life, it's not the most important thing. And I think beyond a certain level of like having the house or the income or enough money to go on a couple of vacations a year, I think there is more to the game than that. And I think it's often a selfish pursuit.
We're telling ourselves that it's for the family, but actually they've never asked you to do that. And they're actually giving you the feedback that like, we don't want you to do this. We want these other things that are more important.
Values. He would say that if you spend the majority of your time doing work and business, you don't value family most, you value work and business.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to another episode of Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. I'm a men's dating, relationship, and intimacy coach, guiding men to a deeper experience of themselves and of their love lives, just so that they can have more, so they can expand beyond the limited range of what they feel is possible into something that is a lot more enjoyable for them. And today we have a beautiful episode of a good friend of mine. It's lovely I love actually doing podcast episodes with people that I know well, because it's you've had so many conversations. It's beautiful. Let's talk to Chris Brown. He is a entrepreneur, coach of coaches, helps gym owners expand their businesses in many ways. But also we spent a lot of time together over this last kind of 8-9 months as we're both on a program with a past guest I had on, John Wynand. So we're on a program with him. So we spent a lot of time together. So we really just jump into his area of expertise around the work he does with men, which is mainly around helping business owners and businessmen create balance in their lives, but also help them increase their business. But we really focus on in this conversation, talking about the ways in which, as a busy man, as a man who is running his own business, needs to be able to communicate with his partner, balance that work life, children, wife balance, and so forth, the meanings of success, the kind of unconscious ways, and we talk a lot about like the unconscious ways that what we make success mean about who we are and how we then project that onto our families and how that can be harmful. We talk a lot about communication in terms of like being defensive and why we're defensive and how we project things onto other people and how we deflect and reasoning with our partners and how we're trying to win arguments and how that can be really harmful to the relationships and how we kind of build them. We talk about integrity as well, like how and why integrity is important, not from this kind of like, oh, you're wrong, you're not in integrity way, but actually why we should be paying attention to where we're in and out of integrity as well. And we talk about a subject that quite a few of my clients have spoken to me about and past people is like, how do we transition from work mode into family mode? And really dive into that as well. And it's just a beautiful conversation by two men who are just really committed to the service of men at the many levels that they operate. But if you listen to this episode and some of these things resonate with you, especially in terms of, your relationship and your joy and your happiness and so forth, feel free to get in contact with me. I currently have a couple of spots open for one-to-one coaching. At the moment, my group program is sold out. But get in contact with me about one-to-one coaching. And if you want to be on my future group programs, let me know as well. But without further ado, I'll let you get into the episode. Welcome, listeners, back to another episode. And this week I have a guest who I've come to get to know very, very well over the last 9 months or so. And he's a man, a multi-dimensional man. You know, I think in the world, it's easy for people to see him as a business leader, a man who helps people grow their businesses in very effortless and easy ways. But I've got to know him as a man of depth, a man of feeling, and a man of expression, and a man of joy. Today I have with me Chris Brown. How you doing, brother?
Thank you for that incredible intro. Yeah, man, I'm good. I appreciate it. It's always weird, like receiving someone else's introduction to you. You're like, fuck, am I all of those things? Like, yeah. So thank you. Appreciate that.
I've got video evidence of most of it.
There we yeah. Yeah, man. It's been one of my great pleasures of this year has actually been our relationship and getting to know each other, man. Like it really is.
Yeah, man, definitely. Likewise. But listeners, I tell you that we shared a lot of time. We both joined up on John Wineland's EMLT program, Embodied Men's Leadership Training. And we actually met for the first time in Heathrow Airport in March, I think it was, when he was in the queue and I was coming. Yep. We knew we were going to meet there, and that was the first time we met in person. And then we pretty much spent 2 weeks together after that, a week and a half.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Debriefing every day in the
hotel
tent.
room, sharing tents,
pissing under the stars together. Yeah.
Oh, the pissed under the stars. Because this is to tell you, so the first in-person part of John's program was in the desert in like California, Central California somewhere. No Wi-Fi, nothing, but we had tents. So every night, before you go to bed, you get out and be like, I need to take a piss before I go to sleep. And then you start pissing into a bush and you look up and the whole sky was just like full of stars. And I found myself always kind of stopping in awe and being like, wow, like, fuck, that's kind of makes you feel super small and just like this little piece of sand on this earth.
Yeah, it was fucking vast. Just that, like, I've never seen stars like it crazily, to be honest.
Yeah. It was a really beautiful scene. And it was, complete darkness because, maybe the odd little light in someone's tent. But other than that, it was just a great expanse. But I'm going to start with the first question I like to ask people is actually, what is it you do? And what was your journey to do the work that you now do?
Yeah. So primarily I help coaches, gym owners, fitness facility business owners like grow and scale their company, make 20, 30, 40, 50,000, 7 figures a year. That's kind of like my core work. But I guess now what I'm doing is like fusing a lot of the stuff that I've been doing around healing and men's work and leadership training and like deeper stuff, like intimacy, relationship stuff fused in with the business stuff. We'll get into it, but I went through divorce. It finalized a few months ago, but it's been a 3-year separation from my wife. And like my own journey over the last 3 years has been one of therapy and breath work and trauma release, just so much inner work. And what I began to realize was that like a lot of business owners are like functioning out of patterns or wounds or this desire to like prove themselves in the world. And this, I can speak as a straight man to straight men, this masculine drive of like wanting to win and dominate and be successful in business. And a lot of those pursuits are often quite empty. And so what I try to do now is like bring a lot more of the holistic, I don't want to use the word spiritual, but kind of spiritual, I guess, inner work, depth, presence into business growth as well. So like when business grows, life gets better, not worse. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, sometimes we can spend 12, 13, 14, 15 hours a day, like focused on our business and bring the leftovers home to family. And for me, it was like, okay, like this is what I have done. Now let me see if I can spot those patterns in others and support them in that journey. How I got there, like 13 years ago, I started out as a personal trainer. Actually, 2009, what's that, 14 years ago? Started out as a personal trainer. Then partnered with a good friend of mine, Paul Moore, to open 26 outdoor boot camps across the UK. He went through his own episode. We separated that. And then I opened a gym in 2013, which was 10 years ago in October, actually. Opened the gym and then started mentoring gym owners, really. And found a real passion for online marketing, sales, advertising, content creation, email marketing, all the stuff that I really love doing today. But yeah, like I feel like I was very one dimensional. And what I want to bring to my clients right now is it is more expansion beyond just like linear business growth. I think we have a metric of what success looks like in business. And that's often like, I was making this much money and now I'm making this much money. That's success. But for a lot of people, their life is in disarray. You know, when they're pursuing the growth of business, their life becomes more challenging and more demanding. And yeah, things can actually get worse instead of better. You know, that's kind of long and short of where I'm at and how I got there.
And it's interesting you say that about success, because I think, you know, if you're in the Instagram world, you know, I'm a coach, so you see all these people going, I hope you get to 10K a month, you know, that sort of thing, right? And something that I've realized, especially as I've gone full time the last couple of years, is like, well, the more money I've basically just been working more and more and more, right? And both me and my partner also, we're always acknowledging this to each other. Like, we regularly work on Sundays. Like, we basically work 6 days a week, right?
Yeah.
And we keep saying to each other, we're like, you know, this can't go on forever. And we're really acknowledging that we can't work like this forever. There's things that are going to come into our life that's going to mean that has to change over a period of time. But in the kind of old metric of success, it's money. So it's like, if I'm making, my business is more successful if I'm making more money. And that's not even necessarily profit, right? That's just like the business is making more money. But like, what I'm kind of getting from you is that, like, this doesn't work to kind of think that that is the most important metric, because as you said, you know, you could be making more and more money, but if your life is in disarray, like, is it really worthwhile?
Exactly. Well, like if we speak as again, I'll just pre-frame this. Like, I'm speaking from my experience as a straight man to a heterosexual kind of dynamic. And what I would say is that for most men, they think that their job begins and ends with, I provide income and a roof over the heads of my family and I put food on the table. And like, that's what most people think. But like, what we know and what I've come to know through the work that I've done with John and the various other endeavors that I've been on over the last 3 years, some crazy shit, is that actually there is a demand for more than that. And whilst that is important in getting out of survival and, you know, moving higher up Maslow's hierarchy of needs is important in life, it's not the most important thing. And I think beyond a certain level of like having the house or the income or enough money to go on a couple of vacations a year, I think there is more to the game than that. And I think it's often a selfish pursuit. So what I've learned from my own behavior upon reflection and also clients is that we can say, I am doing this for my family. I'm pursuing this for my kids. I'm, you know, building this business and this life for freedom. But actually it's often a selfish justification of why you're doing that. It's like, I'm actually doing this for self, yet using my family as an angle. And yeah, it's not necessarily that you just have this idea. I think we selfishly label our business pursuit as, I'm doing this for my family. And that's a super, super big challenge. And I think my work now with clients really is to get them to look at life beyond just this linear pursuit and look at it more expansive. Like, how are you showing up as a father? How are you showing up as a partner? How are you showing up as a business leader? How are you leading your clients? And I think it's so important to look at it multidimensionally as opposed to linearly.
So it's like, there's the kind of myth that us men having in our minds is like, if I'm making lots of money, I'm being a successful man, I'm doing a good job, I'm providing, when actually it means that we forget about all the other aspects of providing that are important, like emotional support, like depth of connection to our kids, like presence with them, and interest in their lives and what's happening, and being there for the important moments, because it's not just about making more money and having bigger houses and better holidays.
Yeah, and I'll pre-frame this by just saying, you know, as a straight man speaking to straight men in heterosexual relationships, I think we believe that to provide, you know, money and food and shelter are the most important things. And honestly, like beyond that, I think women require so much more from us. And it actually gets to a point, I think, with clients where maybe their relationship becomes sticky and their desire is just being like, to build this business. I'm going to do this for my family. I'm going to do this for my kids, and we're going to make a lot of money. It's going to be fine. And I think beyond, going on vacation a couple of times a year, having a nice home and being able to have some surplus income every month, like it's a fruitless labor for a lot of people, unless you're expanding the relationship that you have more depth, you have more presence with your kids, and there's just more general awareness. I think it's a very easy and selfish pursuit to go like, I'm going to grow this business and I'm doing this for my family. When reality is, it's just, we touched on values slightly, and Dr. John DeMartini was like, he would say that if you spend the majority of your time doing work and business, you don't value family most, you value work and business, because that's where you put your energy and attention. And I think we've got to be very mindful of that, because these subtle ways in which we justify behavior, it can also be the way in which we defend against our partner. If they say, oh, you're working late again, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this for our family and I'm trying to build this thing for us. And the reality is, all they want, your kids and your partner, is your presence, your attention, and your love.
And we somehow, but actually, as you're saying, it's like this money making, this business growing is for our own egos, for us, for men to feel like we're being good men, we're doing a good job. And we keep telling ourselves like we're doing it for a family, because that seems noble. That seems like being the good man, the good husband, right? But in fact, really, it's quite selfish. And then there's this kind of narrative that we run, is we're telling ourselves that it's for the family. So whenever there's like a pushback on the amount of hours that we're working or the amount of time we're working, we go, but I'm doing this for you. We're doing this for you. But actually, they've never asked you to do that. And they're actually giving you the feedback that like, we don't want you to do this. We want these other things that are more important. Like you said, presence, time together, quality time, intimacy, enjoyment. Like as my partner Orsa's mum would say, I quote her, and I think it's a really beautiful phrase she calls it creating memories. She's just like, make sure you create memories together, because like those are the things you look back for your life and go, there was that time we went to this place and we did that thing. And those are the things often that as men, especially when we just get into this idea of make more money, build a bigger business, saying it's for our family, that we actually completely miss out on those things, those memory creation moments.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that as well, but that often, I mean, if we would, let's just sidestep a second. If we were to look at the global landscape of men who are successful in careers, usually they're out of, I mean, I'm really, really generalizing here, but a lot of men that are out of shape, have money, but terrible relationships, drinking too much, maybe sleeping around. Like there's a lot of that happening. And obviously that's not everyone, and it's not, maybe not even the majority. However, it's very common. There are plenty of like wealthy, successful men with terrible relationships with a wife and kids. And I think when you look around, I think I listened to Esther Perel say this, and she was like, there are very few role model relationships in the world. But you can always look up to an entrepreneur who's making money, or somebody who's being successful in business. And we can look to these people with like 100,000 followers, 200,000 followers, 1 million followers, or they're making, 100 grand a month or 10 grand a month, 50. We can look to these people, but we're only seeing the surface. And we talk about Instagram being the highlight reel, obviously, but also we've got to be mindful who we model. Because if we have success at all costs, then it can be costly. And I think, I quote John here, you had John on the podcast of the week, which is a great episode, but John would say like relationships don't die through major fractures often. It's often through 1,000 pinpricks of broken trust. And that was really, there was a lot in my relationship that went on, but one of the core consistent themes was like, I'd be home for tea at 5:30 and it would be 6:15, or it'd be 6:05, or it would be 7:00. And it would be just like, I've just got this one more thing to do, or give me 10 minutes and I'll be home, and it would take me 45 minutes. Those little micro fractures all of the time, like it can often be very harmful to the feminine. It's like, he's letting me down again, and then your word isn't trustworthy.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, like, because like quite a few of my clients are exactly as you mentioned. It's like they're doing really well in business. Their businesses are doing really well. They've got lovely partners, whether that's their partners at home, whether their partners have really great businesses or great careers in themselves. And they're shit at relationships, right? They don't communicate very well. They can't be trusted in terms of their word. Like like you said, I'm so guilty of this one, as you said there, was like, I'll be back in 10 minutes. I'll be done in 10 minutes. And then suddenly, my one is where I'll be sitting on my laptop, also walks through that door behind me, and she'd be like, when are you going to be finished? And I'll be like, I'm just finishing up this Instagram post. I'll be done in 10 minutes. And then, you write it and you edit a few bits and then you put it on Instagram and suddenly you look at the time, you're like, that was 55 minutes ago. Where did that hour go that I was doing it? But it happens, right? But these guys, they put so much of their focus into business, so much of their energy into business to like solve that problem, to solve the next problem. And they love the kind of dopamine that comes with solving that next problem. And I wonder if you feel what I'm about to say feels true for the men that you've worked with, but they don't put that energy into their relationship because the relationship they don't understand how to make that relationship feel as successful. Because the thing with relationships is you can do all the right things, the right things, the things that Esther Perel says and the things that John Wineland says. And then your partner's still complaining about something, or she's still annoyed at you, or your kids are still unhappy, or, the intimacy isn't where it is. And it can really feel like a very complicated sphere to be in, and there's no clear path to improvement. And they kind of almost, the men I've noticed, that they kind of shrink away because they're like, this is complicated. I can't fix this and solve this, but I can put all my energy into this business and feel good. And they allow their relationship often, or, I've got a few clients who it's dating lives. They allow their dating lives to just wither away and die because they can't get that same feeling of success from relationship and dating as they can from their business.
And there's another layer here that I've identified in myself, but also clients. It's like, it's not always just success. It's actually adoration. Like I can get a lot of adoration at work and I can come home and I've left some like fucking underwear on the floor and then I get tore down, or I forgot to put the bins out or some shit like that. Right. I'm like, fuck this. Just being told I'm a king by my clients all day. I come home, I forgot the bins and now, fucking hell, I'm trying to build a business in the world. I can't remember the bins as well. Like, these are the things I used to say. Like, I used to just have this expectation about at work, and like, people are loving on me and support me. And then I come home and I forget something simple. That's just like, it's a responsibility, man. And I think that's the thing. It's not even necessarily a success, but we can get a lot of praise and adoration as like little boys who are out there in the world who want to be acknowledged and recognized, and we're doing things for the approval of our parents or our peers. Like that can play out in the macro in business too, So when we get that there and then we come home in our relationship and we're like not getting it, it can be very, you put your attention where you get the praise, essentially.
Yeah, I love that. You put your attention where you get the praise. And it's so true, especially in the world of like social media where, you get likes and you get comments, you got people sending you DMs and telling you how amazing what you've written on the reel you've just done. And, business can feel like a continuous like stream of, like you said, adoration and success. But the relationship is like complicated, like you said, it's like not one wrong move, because I don't think that's always the case, but it's like where there's a consistent lack of attention and focus, your relationship will kind of highlight that to, or your partner will highlight that to you regularly. And I guess the joy in that, and I did a reel about this recently after speaking to a client, is it sharpens you, right? That's the whole purpose of like, the business is all well and good, but you know how to do that. And this is the relationship might be the area where you need to do the work, and actually where your consciousness is more required, or where you have more to kind of more skill to increase in. So that like this area where your partner's calling you for greater depth of consciousness by remembering the bins, it feels like an attack. It feels like someone cutting you down. But in fact, they're like, hey, you're building this amazing world-class business, but could you also bring the bins into your awareness as well?
Yeah. Well, I think that's what it is, right? It's like it's a lack of awareness. And more recently, when we went through that thing with John around integrity, I remember, you'll remember, this was like a really big call for me because I was like out of integrity in so many ways with the world, like just parking fines or like little things, like I would just ignore them. And I think that's the same level of attention I used to put towards the bins. I mean, even now, like a full disclosure, my next door neighbor puts my bin out like every week, and I would forget 75% of the time if he didn't do that, right? and and I, and I think it is that, like, can you bring awareness to every part of your life as opposed to just the things that are important in business? And it's hard when you have a demand and you have a mission and you have a passion and you have a vision. It can actually be very demanding and very, I guess, out of balance. You know, we are trying to seek balance in life, but when we have something that's like so visceral and we have this desire to share a message and a mission and we have a purpose in life, it can be very out of whack. It can be very out of balance. And I think the work that I'm aiming to do with clients now is like to be just generally more aware. I mean, even simple, I had a client today message me, and one of his feedback forms for a client check-in was like, it was a complaint basically. And it was a complaint of attention, right? I sent you something, you didn't get back to me for like a day or two, and it feels like you're not supporting me. Essentially, it was a female client to a man. So it's like amplified. And sometimes these things in relationship play out in business too. And he came back at me with like, I'm going to say this. And I'm like, dude, you just sound really defensive. And I said, just like slow down, send her a voice note, be like, thanks so much for the feedback. Let's speak on our call when we next speak, and let's come to a solution. And it's super interesting because I used to be the same way. And, Danielle, my ex-wife, she used to call me like the politician, right? Because I just like have such a skill for defending myself and like twisting things and turning things and deflecting. But I would do that in business too. And so I guess if we kind of look at the grand scheme of things, there are things in our life that are from patterns and wounds or part of our programming grown up as childs that actually limit us in life. Limits the way we communicate with our peers, our clients, our potential clients, our, members of staff, our intimate relationships. But it really impacts and affects us across the board. And that's why I think, as you said before, when people go, I can get leads, I can make sales, I can make money, it's very black and white, it's very tangible, it's very clear. And I think the growth is actually the awareness of all the other little things, that are around that.
It's the little, as one of my spiritual mentors would say, it's the little grains of sand in your shoe that you have to start to bring in and notice, right? Because most of the big boulders we've taken care of, we've taken care of the really big, heavy lifting stuff. But it's like in the process of being better men, should we say, it's like taking into our awareness the pinpricks, as you mentioned before, like the tiny little things, like, and it's almost, you talked about integrity, but it's it kind of reminds me of tidying, right? For some reason, I fucking hate tidying, right? I hate tidying up.
Me too.
But it's that attention to detail of like, oh, like this afternoon I did, we have a cleaner actually, so I don't really have to tidy very often. And I do yoga in a particular place, and underneath one of the chairs in our front room, there's dust on the floor. So like, obviously she never needs to really hoover under there because no one sees it, but I see it. And I always forget that I'm always like, oh, I should go back and hoover underneath this chair. And then it'll just, when I look under it, when I'm doing yoga and I'm in like downward dog and I'm in, and so forth, I won't notice. But it's those little things that we don't notice that we just forget about. They just slip outside of our awareness because, we've got a lot on. But in the realms of relationship, it really starts to get hammered home, as you said. But the thing I want to jump onto is what you said about being defensive, because I had a call with a group of men that I'm working with. And one of the things most often, quite a few of them said was like, oh, my partner comes at me with something, I receive it as a criticism, I get defensive, I try and argue my point, I try and rationalize it and blah, blah, blah. And it all blows up. And they're like, but I don't understand. Like why was she generalizing or saying always and saying never? And then when I tackle what she's saying, there's like this big kind of blow up. And I'm like, because what she's saying isn't the thing she's telling you. The words are not the important thing. There's a message underneath the message that's being said to you, and that's the thing you need to speak to, right? This is not your business meeting where the exact words that are used are like legally binding and so forth. This is a relationship. This is a flow of emotional energy that goes between you and your partner. And that's the thing you need to be paying attention to and feeling for. And the guy was like, oh, he kind of stopped and was like, oh shit, yeah. Now it's really obvious what she's been trying to tell me. And you're like, yeah, because you've been listening with your head, right? You've been listening with your head, but you haven't been listening with the rest of you. You haven't been listening with your heart, with your body, and paying attention to her body. You're just going with the head, and the head gets defensive because it's coming from this ego feeling attacked. And I imagine this is a very common situation you also see with the men that you work with.
Yeah, it's like, this translates to the women that I have as well, because obviously there are women that I work with in business that are in like a very masculine drive, right? They want to win, they want to succeed, they want to make more money. And I'll speak from my own experience. What I noticed in the past is that I would get super defensive because something would, basically how I would perceive anything was like criticism, you've done it wrong, right? Doesn't matter what they say, criticism, you've done it wrong. And now, even now specifically, even in my co-parenting dynamic, it's difficult at times because I catch myself now. I get like like this feeling in my body, and I want to fight back against that feeling instantly. It's like a hot potato. I want to be like, fuck you, like have it back. And now I've just kind of programmed myself like to stay curious, stay open, and ask myself, where is she right? You know? And like, can I come from that place? Like, where is she right? And that was the first thing I reflected back to this client today. Like, you are defending against the fact that you didn't get back to her for like a day and a half. Like, where is she right? You know? I was like, I don't think it's unreasonable for somebody to expect a response back within a day, you know, especially someone that's paying you money. Like, I think it's a reasonable request. And that's the thing that it can really break and fracture relationships just in general, in business, in life, in anything. Like if somebody's unheard, like maybe they're expressing something and it's not perfect. Maybe they're saying it in a way that's projecty. Maybe they're saying it and it's an always or a never statement. And I think the problem with like 2023 is that we expect this pristine, perfect, like therapized, processed communication where it's like, I feel this way and it's my stuff. And like, the reality is, in the heat of the moment, very few of us can actually do that. And nor do we even have the skills or the tools, you know? We're expecting a lot from people today to like own their own shit, you know? And I think there is space in life. And I've definitely been in that space myself the last 2-3 years. You know, as I've gone through this journey, it puts you in this hierarchy of this like egoic space of like, you can't speak to me like that. You've got to own your own shit. Stop projecting at me. Ultimately, there has to be space for it. And can you stay curious and open enough to be like, okay, like what are they actually trying to say? Can you ask a question? What is it that you actually mean? When you say that, what is it you actually mean? And I think that's the key, like, especially for men, like you never, and I was the politician, like, period. But you're not going to deepen in relationship or intimacy by defending against the complaints that are probably even mildly true. You know, like, we don't want to be made to be wrong, right? Simple, especially as men.
Yeah. And I love what you said there is like, where are they right? You know, so really, because I know that feeling you described there where someone comes to you with a criticism or a feedback or criticism, and it literally feels like someone's punched you in the gut. Someone's punched you and you need to get ready to defend or counterattack. And it's like very reactive. It's like, oh, someone's come for me. I need to defend this, like, and tell them how they're wrong. They've told me I'm wrong, so I need to tell them how I'm not wrong. Instead of being like, well, it's not about right and wrong. it's about truth. It's like,
Yes.
what's the truth in what they're saying? Like, where's the truth there? Like, oh, actually, yeah, I haven't. Do you know what? I'm really sorry. I haven't got back to you in a day. I can really take responsibility for that. And in the future, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But instead, what we do, we go to what we search in for what they. It's like we scan what they've said, and we're listening from the point of view of like, where is this person's criticism or feedback incorrect? And let me attack those pieces and go for those pieces first, instead of listening from this perspective of like, there's going to be truth in what they said. Let me take on the truth of what they said and speak to that truth first. And I think we'd all, across relationship, across business, like we'd all have a lot better experience of communicating with people if we search for the truth instead of we search for where they're wrong.
I agree. Like, it's like a character defamation, right? It's like if they say something that's mildly wrong, then like we pick at that and we pull apart until we dismantle the argument. And that's what I used to do extremely well. And like when I look back at that, like it does give me like a mild element of shame. I'm like, fuck, like it's pretty fucking manipulative, to be honest, to like take something that there is 75% truth and 25% false accusation and then like invalidate the entire thing. And that's been my growth, man. Like in all areas of life. And I think, yeah, coming back to integrity, even there were so many little things. Like if I was like I'm institutionally late, right? And I have been for like my entire, like 5 minutes late, 7 minutes late. I could have an hour and I could still end up 10 minutes late, right? It just kind of is in the fabric of my DNA. I hate it, but it is part of me and I'm working hard at it. But I used to like make up micro lies, like, oh, there was traffic or there was this and there was that. And I think when we did the integrity call with John, I was just like, fuck, like this is a lot of energy just to like not tell the truth. Just be like, sorry, I'm late. I fucking missed time. I thought I could get more in the time that I had than I could. And you actually happens is like people start respecting you more when you start actually being truthful. When you start owning things, people aren't cutting you down as a person. People aren't trying to make you out to be wrong or a bad person. They're just highlighting. And I think, you know, as conscious beings, right, in the work, there is always going to be somebody in a relationship dynamic who has more consciousness in that place. Maybe someone's triggered and the other person isn't. And I think now my responsibility is to be as conscious as I can in a communication, like really drop into my body, listen, breathe, be present, and actually listen to the layer below the words and see if there's something that I can extract or understand and be curious about, ask questions around, instead of me defending against, which is actually not listening, me just actually listening and going, okay, like what is she trying to say? Or what is he trying to say? What is actually true in this? How can I deepen my understanding here? How can I ask more questions for my own clarity? How can I stay curious and open? You know, that's the key, I think, in this moment is like, how can you be curious and still open and not close? And that takes time, man. It really does. But yeah, what I dislike about the world today, where people deem themselves as conscious, you're conscious, but you can't stay open and curious. And therefore you criticize and judge other people for not being, you know, pristine with their communication. That's not very conscious to me. You know, if you use judgment and criticism in the way in which somebody else is communicating, which they're probably doing the best that they can in that moment, then you're not very evolved. You're not as spiritually as adept as you think you might be.
Because it's that like, it's the they've almost fallen into the very black and white world again of like, well, this is how you do it, and if you're not, it's, and they use kind of almost boundaries as like, well, you can't communicate to me exactly what it is that you're saying and what you want and how you want it, so I can't have this conversation, so come back to me with this conversation when you know exactly what's going on for you, how you feel, and how you want to communicate in a way that I can hear you. And it actually just creates it's like another side of the coin of like kind of unconsciousness, where we become reactive and we get angry and we deflect away the conversation, but wrapped up in this, like, I'm super conscious and I can use all these like particular phrases around nonviolent communication or, so forth. But actually I'm still quite closed off to really listening and hearing. And it's interesting, because I sometimes I observe it and see it through either clients or, I coach some of Orsa's clients as well, where there's that same like, oh, well, they didn't say it in the perfect way. And there's actually a laziness of like, I'm not going to really be bothered to bring my awareness to understand the deeper layers of what's being said.
Yeah, it's like spiritual egotism, right? Which is a weird concept, but like a lot of people have it. Like, oh, I meditate for an hour a day. You don't meditate, then I'm better than you, or and it can get to that point. And I've definitely been in that place in my own journey too. Like, I'm not saying that. I definitely don't want to be like, oh, like, because I don't also throw shade at the people who are on their own journey too. But it's like that was a catch for me, that I would only receive. So I went from unconscious to more conscious around communication, then only expecting people to communicate with me consciously, to then actually getting to the other side of that and going, okay, like I have tools and skills here. Like, how can I use these tools and skills here to deepen together? How can I use what's available to me to hold space for this? And for sure, like, let me just get this, like, abusive communication's not okay. Like, we're not talking about abusive communication here. We're not talking about violent communication here. We're talking about maybe your partner brings something to you that's true to them, but delivers it just in a way that's maybe slightly triggered or heightened or activated. And I think you have a beautiful container with Orsa. Yeah, you have a beautiful container with Orsa for like monthly communication and to speak your truth. But I'm sure there are moments in between where like you just can't hold onto something and it comes out. And there's got to be space for that. We're humans. We're real. Like we have to have that ability to just vent. And it's the same, in business with clients. With this guy, he's like making it mean so much more than it was. Maybe just in that moment, she felt unsupported. She sent in that message. And that's why it's like, stay curious, stay open. Like, where is she true? Where could she be right? What could you do to improve? And I don't think you can go far wrong from that.
And it's as he said there, the meaning, it's the meaning that we place on what people are doing and saying that actually creates, to go to further, actually, that's what triggers us. It's not them and what they've actually said. It's the meaning we place. Like, if our partner's saying that we're working all the time, even the response that we give that's like, oh, but I'm doing this for the family, there's like a meaning that we've placed on what they've said. Like them saying you're working a lot or you've missed lots of events or for the kids or whatever. And we say, oh, but I'm doing it for the family. It's like, well, wait a second. What's the meaning you've just placed on what was said to you there? And what's your stuff that you've just placed on that? Like, you're not doing a good enough job. You should, so forth, and actually unpack like what's actually being said there, because often it's not even a complaint. It's actually, I think we touched on before. It's like calling you to pay attention to like, oh, there's this other thing that's important. Can you please pay attention to this thing? Like, we get that, we're not saying that business is no longer important, but actually there's these other things in our lives that are important that need addressing.
Totally. And again, it's like, it's making sure that, and I will say this as well, like most of the time, like people have to be brutally honest, right? When they're working late, how productive actually are they? And I think this is another thing, like the part of us that defends against the criticism from our partner for staying at work late is also the part of us that's pissed off at ourselves for maybe not being as productive as we could have been that day. So it's like we already have this element of like self-shame around, fuck, I didn't get enough done. And now they're and now she's coming at me as well. Like, I've already got so much on my plate. And what we're doing in that moment is actually reacting from our place of being pissed off at ourselves for not getting the shit done that we need to get done and wasting a load of time. and then using that to be like, and then weaponizing the fact I'm doing this for the family, I'm doing this for us, I'm doing just to make yourself feel better, to soothe the fact that you maybe you're feeling the same thing that she's highlighting.
Yeah. And I can definitely say, like, there's moments where I've sat here in front of my laptop and been like, shit, I haven't, you know, you got that long list of 10, 15 things that you wanted to do that day, and you're only on like number 4, and you're like, it's 8 p.m. Also comes in, is like, we're gonna have dinner today. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm thinking, shit. And I might be short with her. And she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, nothing. You know, and I'm like, oh, you always, and then I'll go into, oh, you're always asking me when I'm done. It feels like it puts pressure on me. And I'll be really honest. But she's not. She's just asking me a question. All the pressure is me. All the pressure is the pressure that existed before she asked me the question. And then I transfer that pressure onto her question to alleviate some of that pressure from myself, and then project onto her that she's doing it. So it's almost like an element of relieving pressure, putting it on her, pointing the finger at her, and saying that it's her fault, to make myself feel better about my own lack. As you just explained, I'm just kind of going through how I do it myself. And it's these tiny things, again, we'll go back to the kind of 1,000 pinpricks. It's these tiny things that really wear away at your relationship. Like every time you do some transference of transferring your own frustration about your own amount that you've done that day in terms of work, how well you're doing with your work and so forth, onto your partner, you create a bit more distance and separation. You remove a little bit of the safety from being able to communicate openly and honestly and ask questions. And then if you're not aware that you're constantly doing that, you know, you can quite easily get down the road a few years and there's a chasm between the two of you. And I don't know if you've seen it in men, but I've definitely seen it, where that chasm gets created and the men had no idea it was happening. And the partner turns out around one day and goes, I'm leaving with the kids and I'm off. And they're like, what? What do you mean you're leaving? The guy's like, I didn't see this coming. And she turns around and said, I've been trying to tell you for years and you haven't paid any attention. You know, you've been so focused on what you're doing and you've been putting all this frustration and anger, this separation's been happening, but you didn't think it was important because I kept saying it again and again. You related to the nagging as, that's just something unimportant that's being said.
Yeah, exactly. That's it, man. Like in a nutshell, it's my experience too. You know, I went through that. And I think for most, I try to drill this in my clients. So like everybody has a limit. And as much as you believe your partner's always going to be there, they're never going to leave you. You've got your family in place. Things are always going to be okay. So you put them to the bottom of the pile. As long as you hold that belief, you are vulnerable to the potential that your relationship breaks down and you no longer get to see your kids every day and every night. And it's a fucking painful place to be, man. It really is. And that alone has become part of my mission in the business coaching world, because you and I have had many conversations. I really am passionate about men's work and doing deeper work with men and helping men, you know, in relationship, in their life, build a bigger life, better life, deeper relationship, more intimate, more connected. But also, like, I have this unique optic that I've worked with people in business for like 10, 12, 13, 14 years. Now, what I believe is my mission is to kind of fuse those things together, where it's business mentoring, but it's also like it's about awareness, it's about depth, it's about expansion, it's about being a better transmission of a human being, and like really valuing everything in your life as opposed to just placing an emphasis on money. And I believe now, like if my client makes 20 grand or 30 grand a month or 40 grand a month, and I have a screenshot of that, yet their life is worse because of the work that we've done together, like I failed as a coach. And there are countless stories of people out there who will send their coach out, I made 10 grand today, I made 15 grand today, I made 5 grand today, or I hit my first 10K a month. Yet their relationship with their wife and kids is suffering. And it's like, we've got to change that narrative, man. There are too many families breaking that don't need to, because men aren't aware enough of what their family needs. Like, we're in a new world now. We're not in the 40s and 50s anymore. You can't just come home at the end of the day and expect your tea on the table and like put your feet up with a bottle of beer or a can of beer and do fuck all else around the house, unfortunately. endless
The times have
blowjobs
changed.
and yeah. Yeah. Tea on the table and endless blowjobs. It's no longer reality, man.
It's no, and it's interesting you said that. Something that I've dawned on with my own coaching is, a lot of the time people just want end results, right? And you're kind of speaking into it. It's like end results in business is like more money.
Mm-hmm.
And in what I do, especially when I'm working with people who are dating, end results is relationship. And I've really, especially in the last kind of year, I've started to not allow the focus of my clients on my idea of what success is be about them getting into relationship. My aim for them is to have a happier life across the board, whether it's work, if their family, with their parents, is to have a happier life in general. And if the relationship comes along out of that, which does happen, then great. But I would rather that than them find a relationship and that be at the detriment in other areas of their life. Or maybe it's the wrong relationship, just so I can say, oh, look, 50% of my clients end up in relationships within 6 months of working together, because actually that's not important. You want people to be living a life that they're enjoying, that they're happy with. And it's similar to what I'm hearing you say there. It's like that extra money isn't worth anything if there's more, if it in some way that creates more misery in their lives. And then you went on to say about how things have changed. And it's interesting because I think there's a lot of men that feel really frustrated that the goalposts have shifted and changed, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is that those goalposts haven't just like suddenly changed in the last kind of 5-10 years. These goalposts have been moving for the last 70 years, basically, right? I know I've only been on this planet for 30 years, but they've been moving for the best part of 70 years. And if you didn't realize that was moving, right, and you just paid no attention to it, and now it's hit you, like, it's kind of on you that you haven't been paying attention to society, to women's rights, to, gender equality and all these things. And somehow you're trying to deny reality, and you're complaining that the world is changing, and you want the world to go backwards to a time when it was easier for you, and you had to have less awareness, you had to have a less emotional capacity, so that you can just put your feet up and do fuck all apart from going to work and doing the thing that's easy for you, when actually that world created much of the pain that you experienced. Like, like there's a lot of men who are unconsciously living out their parents' relationships, even though they know their parents' relationships weren't good, but they haven't cottoned onto the fact that it can be different.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I think that is the same thing that you said about men being in relationships, not being aware, and then their partner suddenly leaves. It's like they're denying the reality that stares them right in the face. It's like, I think we're in such a beautiful time in history, man. Like, we're going to look back at this time and go, fuck, like 2023 was a fucking great year to be alive, I mean, even through the hardest points of like COVID and everything else that's gone on, like, I think we still, like, were so connected in that period of time where we were disconnected because of the internet. People could still make money because of the internet. Like, people launched businesses in that period of time. People made money in that period of time. I mean, you're prime example of this, right? And I think, like, we're arguably complaining, we're complaining about a period of time where we have the least violence in history, the most opportunity there's ever been, more money circulating now than there ever has been. Yet we want to focus on things like cost of living crisis, or complaining at the way things are moving, or, even the gender equality movement, or LG, like, I don't know, well, help me out here, LGBTQT plus, right? Like, yeah. And we're so distracted by all of the things outside of ourselves that it actually limits our own growth. And equally, we're so distracted by our own desires that we're unaware that the world is moving very quickly beyond us. So we allow the external world to dictate our inner world, but then we also complain about the external world and don't focus on our inner world. And life is a mirror. If you're constantly in argumentative conflict with people, if you aren't in the level of success that you would like in your life, if you don't have the business or relationship that you want, it is nobody else's responsibility other than your own. And as John would say, like, men are responsible for the culture of the relationship. I mean, and I've got to be very careful here because of like the way of the world today, but like, I still have pretty traditional views in that. Like, I like to lead, and I love my feminine partners to lead love, and I like to lead structure, and I think, if anything, just taking responsibility for the culture of the relationship, either side, if both parties did that, like, I didn't speak my truth here and lead him, to my heart, or I didn't, create structure for our relationship to flourish and love to blossom. Like, if both people do that, then we can't go far wrong. I think what we rather do is like complain that the other person doesn't do something or didn't do something, instead of actually going, you know what, like, here's where I'm responsible.
Yeah, because it's easier, isn't it? So easier to point the finger. It's always easier to see where someone else has messed up, right? Mm-hmm. Or where someone else has a dysfunctional pattern, than for us to look at ourselves and go, this is what I'm doing actually. Like, it's much easier to see because we got eyes. It's almost like that. We got eyes that go outwards.
Yes,
they see exactly. Outwards, but they don't really look at our own behavior very well. And they don't really listen to our ears don't listen to our own words as keenly as we do to kind of other people's. And I 100% agree. It's like, if I say to a man, you're responsible for the culture and relationship, the number of times that he'll turn around and go, but what about my partner? It's like, I didn't actually tell you that she wasn't also responsible. I just said you're responsible because you are responsible. It's like, it goes back to what we were saying before, where we talked about how people will always look for where the statements being said to them is wrong, the criticism is wrong, instead of looking for what we can do, right? We're always looking for what someone else should be doing. And like, when you do take that responsibility in your relationship, but I imagine it's exactly the same in business, right? When you start taking responsibility for yourself and like how you're showing up in your business, it's like, well, the market conditions start to have less influence on you. If you're like, I can't make any money because COVID's fucked us and the government are doing this, and the World Health Organization are doing this and this. Well, like, you're basically saying there's nothing you can do. You're stepping into helplessness and victimhood, right? Yeah, you're powerless. And when you say you're powerless, then you really do feel that powerlessness, and you're going to point the finger at everyone else and hoping they're going to change and it's going to make your life better. But even if they do change, you're still telling yourself you're powerless.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I actually think the reel I did this morning was very linked to this. It's like, we've got to be mindful not to find ourselves in a place of victimhood where we start to reiterate stories and narratives around why it's difficult for us to do X. And these can be super subtle. Like, I consider myself pretty conscious in a way. Like, I have a pretty resilient mindset. I study a lot, I train a lot, I practice a lot. I've been thinking big for many years, and still these little subtle back doors pop up and go, and I can find myself, it's really hard right now to do this, or it's difficult because of this. I had a story for many years. I helped fitness professionals, gym owners, and I was like, the market's too small, I can't hit the results that other people do. And then Alex Hormozy comes along and does like $40 million in a year and $100 million over 3 years, and like, here's me just reiterating this story for like 2 or 3 or 4 years around why it was difficult for me to grow my business because the market is too small. And what I wasn't doing is like, what am I not doing that's required of me in order to scale to the level that I want? And I think it's the same here, man. It's like any part of our life, we've got to be mindful not to consider the reasons why we can't or the reasons why it's difficult, and actually consider what is available to you. What can you do? What is something that makes it simple or easy for you to do something? Like, what are the things that you have capacity or skills to do right now? You know, we're not going to be able to do everything perfect and immediately, but there are things we could do in this moment that would help and improve the quality of our life.
That leads me on to a question I was going to ask you is like, we talked about, this awareness and these pieces that we miss and, not taking responsibility. I want to circle back to like balance for business owners, right? Like, with all these pieces that they're juggling a business, they're growing, there's a life, there's a partner potentially, there's children. It's like, how can they bring like balance or harmony to their lives?
I think first of all, honestly, it's like really understanding what your pursuit is. So if you want to create global impact, I mentioned the home ownership before, like if you want the levels that he wants, like billionaire status, like you're going to have a lot of imbalance. It's just impossible to have balance. I think for me, actually going, like a billionaire right now in my life doesn't feel aligned whatsoever. Like I don't want to hit that level. Even $100 million right now doesn't feel like the thing that I want to do currently. I'm not saying that I can't change my mind down the line, but currently it's not. And I think some of us have we have an imbalance with the activities that we're doing that is misaligned to the pursuit that we have. And I think what we've got to actually do is like, what am I saying yes to and what am I saying no to? I'm huge on this right now. It's like every yes you have is a no somewhere else. So if you want to make 10 million a year, you're saying yes to a huge imbalance in your life because it's going to demand a lot from you. And you're going to have to say no to other things. Like you're going to miss out on time with your kids. You're going to miss out on time with your partner. And you're going to have to find somebody who's willing to sacrifice that with you. On the other side of things, or be single. Yeah, like, or be single. Don't build a family if that's your desire and your pursuit. And I think the other side is that by getting clear on your pursuit, then you can understand where the balance will lie. And I think the word balance assumes 50-50, right? It assumes like you are balanced and it's like 50% here and it's 50% there. But that level of balance is different for us all. And I think, those that have kids will resonate with this. My son can be nagging me for my time and attention. And I might be working and I'll be like, listen, give me 5 minutes. Let me do this, And I can shut that down. Or I can go with it for like 7 minutes. And then he's like, right, I'm done now. Leave me alone. I want to be on my own. Like it's just, and so ultimately what we've got to understand is that they don't want time. Like kids especially do not measure time. We do as adults. Kids measure like fun and depth and like your presence. And then they change so quickly and adapt so like vastly and fast that actually they just want you fully there. They don't want you checking your phone in between. So balance for you might be like having strong boundaries around when you work, but when you stop, you stop. It's the same with your partner. Like she doesn't want 60 hours a week from you, but the time that she does have, she wants your presence. Like that's the thing. And I think the time that you are distracted, right? And you're with, say, your feminine partner as an example, that is hurtful to her. Because as the masculine pole, you are presence, you are depth, you are ground, you are structure. And if you are checking out and you're on your phone, then you're neither of those things. And I think that's the important part about balance. It's like, don't confuse balance with like equal across the board. Understand balance as being like, what is it that's required in this season of life for the growth of your business, for your relationship, for the time with your kids. Maybe this season is a real strong growth season in your business. You go, you know what? These are like, I need to do this 12-hour day stint. When I'm done, I'm fucking done. And like, let's just go to the beach. Let's go for a walk. Let's get out. Let's do something. You've got all of my attention. Like Jim Rohn quote, he said, I learned over time that taking the briefcase to the beach was neither productive nor helpful. He said, what I learned was to leave the briefcase at the office when I'm at the beach. And when I'm at the beach, be at the beach. When I'm at the office, be at the office. And it's just such a simple thing. Like he was taking the briefcase to the beach with the kids, trying to do his work. And I think we've got to be just mindful of that. Like, it shows how old Jim Rohn is, by the way, briefcase. But it's like, be fully there with whatever you're doing. Be productive in your work. Be present with your kids. Be present with your partner. And I think that's balance. Like, it's not necessarily linear, like 50-50.
It's why I love the word harmony. Because like it does, because balance, as you said, balance, we often think, okay, balance means everything needs to be equal. Everything needs to be equal and even. And it's like, then we try and like even that time out, and it's not possible. But I love what you said there. It's like being really present to whatever you're doing, whether it's like doing the thing that's fun. Like if you are partying or you're hanging out with friends, like do that thing. You're there to do that thing. Or with your partner, you're with your kids, like do that thing. Don't try and like, because I think we've also got this idea of like efficiency. Like, how can I be really efficient with time all the time?
Yeah.
But you can't be efficient. You can't be efficient with people, like with people and connection and like presence. There's no way to be efficient with that. Like, oh, if I'm gonna hang out with Chris, but actually I'm gonna sit here with my phone and write Instagram posts at the same time, what all that does is detract from the quality of our interaction and detract from the quality of our experience of each other and our friendship and all those things. So it's like, do the one thing you're doing, put all your attention on it and just do that thing and like be focused, be attentive, like put everything into that and do it properly instead of trying to do this kind of multitasking, which actually just divides our attention and we lose because we're always context switching. Yeah.
And I think like most, feminine partners would agree. They'd rather that the partner said like, I'm going to be at work for 2 hours extra than I was, than then come home 2 hours earlier, then carry the work on. I think, this is just a thing that I used to notice in myself. I would say I'm going to be an hour and then I'd come home within an hour, but then I'd still have stuff to do. And it would have been far better for me to say 2 hours, yet have nothing to do. And it's like this subtle mistake that we make. We think like, oh, it's like they want me home. No, like they want you present. So like, even if it takes extra time to do the shit, but then you can drop it as you get in the car, like put some music on, drop work, like transition. I used to talk about transitions a lot to my clients, like transitions, like getting out of work mode into personal life. Almost like you're taking off the superhero cape and like you're coming home and you're just like putting on the dad cape or whatever, right? And I think we've got to be very mindful of those transitions. If you've been crushing it all day and you've been hyper productive and your mind's been locked on and switched on, you come in the door and you're like bringing that energy home. It's very like intense energy. It's not what's required. Like you've got to really drop in.
Do you have any kind of techniques for that? Because it's funny, I've been asked this before from clients. It's like, oh, how do I transition, especially in a world where we're working from home and people are just in their office? Like, how do you transition from, okay, I've been in my home office, working, smashing it, talking figures and numbers and structures and organization, and then I got to open that door, and it goes from this structured masculine world. I go into my family, which is chaotic, and feeling and so forth. Like, I imagine you have some kind of techniques and structures and strategies for like blending from one to the other.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I learned this from Brendan Bouchard many years ago, and it was about like using door frames as transitions. So in your house, using like a certain room, like have a room that makes a meaning. So if you go into your kitchen, it's a certain, like it's a transition of energy. You go into your bedroom, it's a transition of energy. And try and think about every room as a specific texture that you would like it to be. So for example, I don't know, you maybe go into the kitchen where the family and the kids are, and that might be like the texture is presence. So as you walk through that door, you've got like an anchor when it comes to that. Your bedroom, that might be a no phone zone. So like as you go into that place, it's like it's sacred, And so we can create different spaces in our room, in our different spaces within our house, our home, that have different meanings and different energies. I always think if you're working from home, I used to battle with that as well, especially through like the COVID period. I think like going for a walk or a run straight after work, I think is far better than trying to just go straight down into the chaos zone. I just don't think I think it's going to be too overwhelming for you, and it's going to cause more conflict. I think agreeing in advance with your partner, hey, look, when I finish work from home, like I really need half an hour just after that to like decompress and be fully present. Is it okay if I go for a run? Or is it okay if I go straight for a walk? And again, just taking that time to like really, shift energy. I think you think about emotional state, right? It's three things: language, physiology, focus, right? And so physiology is often the thing that will shift us quicker than anything. Moving our body, exercising, breathing, like that will shift us quicker than anything. We can change our focus and attention. We can use different language patterns, but physiology is the thing that will often change our psychology more impactfully than anything else. So breath work, some push-ups, some burpees, a workout, a walk, a run, something like to close the day that will actually like transition you. Like me going to jujitsu, I go at 6:30, like on a Monday and a Wednesday. I can't stay in the same state that I was in before, after, simply because it demands so much of me physically. And so I just noticed, like, I'm just, boom, like so grounded afterwards and just so depleted energetically that it just allows me to be relaxed.
It's hard to leave I've tried a few different things actually, like just for me, and also because we have this bad habit of like, we both come out of our offices and we're just talking about work all night, right?
Yeah.
And some of it is like, before I've left this room, I might shake for like 5 minutes. I put some music on, I might dance, I might move, like you said, and I feel into our relationship. Or if we know we're going to go and do something, like we're going to go for dinner or something like that, I kind of almost not necessarily imagine how I want it to go, but I imagine being in dinner and laughing and joking and, fooling around and being central and being playful and connecting deeply after I put down my work to then go and do that thing. Because otherwise, like, you just carry the mind, you carry your mind of thinking and working into the thing. And but I love the idea about the door frames, the different rooms. It's like each of those rooms is requiring something else of you, because it's trying to create that shift in state. And it's not enough to just go, all right, I'm finished work, I'm not going to talk about work, or I'm not going to be in work mode, because we've been there for like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours sometimes.
Yeah.
So we need to give ourselves some space. I love that. Going for a run, doing some sports, some exercise, all go. Breath work is a beautiful one, because you could just do it on the office floor and then
Exactly.
get out.
Well, and like you say, changing focus too, like placing your attention on what's next. I think it's like brain chemistry though. When I notice even now, like I'm in state, I'm in flow, I'm like, my brain chemistry is really heightened. So for me to then go and like be interactive and loving, and it's very difficult because it's physiological. It's not just your mindset. You're attuned, like an athlete would be attuned. You're in this space and you're attuned to what you're doing in this moment, and you need space and time to transition. But again, like you think about a fighter, right? Now I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but think about like an MMA fighter. You see them in the ring walk, and they're walking towards the cage, and they're laughing, they're fun, like they're loose, they're singing, like my friend Paddy the Baddy, right? Like he's just having a party, having a ball, like, and then he gets in the ring and he gets in the cage and he's just like, boom, you just see just like a shift. And I think that's so anchored in his physiology, like as he goes in that cage and the door shuts, it's like boom, he's dropped in. But before that, he's like 2 minutes late, 2 minutes earlier, he's like having a rave, he's vibing off the crowd. And I think we've almost got to train ourselves to be that way at home too. Like boom, like I'm locked in, I'm present for what's required of me right now.
Yeah. And I'm super aware of time because I can see the time is running away from us. And I think maybe that's a nice place to switch on, because it's something that I think a lot of us are having to deal with. And we all have all these wonderful morning routines to get us ready for the day. Like, whether that's, for me, it's like meditations and embodiment practice and breath work and so forth. But actually we also need stuff to allow us to like slip out of our day into the rest of our lives.
Bookending the day, right? Like I'm huge about this, like bookend your day, because like you just mentioned, it's like you could have, it's almost, let me say the right word here. It's unfair, man, to have like a morning routine to set you up for performance in your business and not have a transitional routine to set you up for your family.
It's quite deep when you think about it like that,
Yeah, man.
It's where it's kind of circles back to things we said before. It's like, what's your, on your hierarchy, how do you prioritize things?
Yeah.
You prioritize business and work because you've got this wonderful half an hour practice, but do you have a practice on a weekend or in an evening so that you're coming into your family time in an optimum state, or you just kind of, they get the leftovers of you?
Yeah, exactly. Are you bringing leftovers home? Are you bringing the best of you home? And as John says, our man guru John, Mr. John Wyland, he will often say, like, the best practice happens when you're tired. He drills that in constantly. The best practice will happen when you're tired. And like, if you can't do it when you're tired, which is going to be the majority of the time at the end of the day, like you're gonna slip. Prioritize your family the way that you do your business, and life will flourish. I can tell you, from somebody who has a co-parented, separated family, life is often easier when you're a tight unit and you're doing it together.
Yeah, that's the level of support. Well, brother, it's been fantastic to sit and weave through these topics with you, and I'm sure the listeners are wondering like where they can get more of you, how they can work with you. Happy to describe some of that.
Probably just best to hit me up on Instagram, to be honest. Like, I'm in a bit of a transitional phase in life right now. I have a YouTube channel, Check In with Chris Brown. I have some podcasts on there, but also it's me, Chris_Brown is my Instagram. So just check me out in there, hit me up. I do daily reels, and that's a commitment 4 days ago. So I'm 4 days in. So I'm claiming it. Daily reels I do, which is just like my thoughts, right? I'm just in a creative process right now, and I'm like, I'm just going to create. That's it. That's where I'm at. Just let me share what's on my mind.
Yeah, that's often so poignant, what's on our minds, Especially when you're used to that kind of daily creative, and it's, before I just say that it's like I've listened to a lot of, me and Chris have talked a lot about what's on, we've said here and on the podcast, and these reels really do touch upon what's real, not just in his life, but there will always be resonance for you. There'll be somewhere you listen and go, oh shit, yeah, I can see where I think about that, or I'm not doing that thing, or that's coming up in my business. So like those sorts of like little nuggets of information are incredibly valuable, especially if you've enjoyed this episode.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Thanks so much. Can't wait to have you on my podcast, dude.
Okay. Yeah. Looking forward to coming up to Liverpool, do a little in-person recording.
Yes, man.
Listeners, will let you know when that happens. But
appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thank you, brother. Wonderful to share this space, and as always, it's such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, man.
And thank you, listeners, for listening. If you've taken anything from this episode, I'm sure myself and Chris would love to hear from you. Those little nuggets that you take, they really They really make a difference knowing that people are able to actualize and action the things we've talked about. So feel free to reach out to us. All the links and so forth are in the show notes if you want to get in contact with either of us. But until next time, I'm going to get my words out. Until next time, ciao, ciao. I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world. Especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening to this episode, you think, oh, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them, share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if, you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at @theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.